A lot of times in the playoffs, bigger moments that actually determine the game completely overshadows big moments that unfortunately fell just a little bit short. Also, a player can put together so many big moments in one playoff run, aka LeBron, that you forget some of his smaller big moments. That's exactly what this video is about. I want to talk about huge playoff moments that you probably watched with your own two eyes and completely forgot about. But before we get into this video, and I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart, man, cut that beat real quick. Thank you guys so much for 200K, man. I appreciate it so much. My big goal is to hit that big 300K by the end of this year. I'm going to put in that work and we're going to get that. Turn on notifications, subscribe, join the movement if you're new, and let's just keep doing what we do, man. Y'all already know. Now let's get into the video. When you think about LeBron's biggest game, I already know exactly what you're thinking about right now. Like I literally know the image that's in your head as I'm speaking right now. As we all know, that season, LeBron was coming off of the biggest choke in NBA history. So that game 6 in Boston, you can definitely say that saved his legacy for sure. But what if I told you it was a game 17 days before that, almost of the exact same magnitude, that also saved his legacy to some extent? In the series right before Boston, Miami met a young up-and-coming Pacers team who seemed to pose as a legitimate threat. Now, keep in mind, this was before Paul George became, Paul George. He was only averaging 12 points. Danny Granger was the big star, and Miami fell down 2-1 with Game 4 in Indiana. Mind you, if LeBron lost this game, they would fall down 3-1, and it would definitely look bad for his legacy. But LeBron came out and he did this. Nobody talks about it. It's almost like nobody knows. But if LeBron lost this game, it may not have ever been this moment. When you think about Game 7 and Steph Curry, again, I already know what you think about.
Message comes, they want to switch the pick and roll. Curry throws it away, an errant pass. 10th turnover for Golden State.
And when you put Game 6 and Klay Thompson in the same sentence, we all remember exactly what happened. But y'all know, after that Game 6, Golden State had another game to play if they actually wanted to get to the finals. It didn't just end after Game 6. In Game 7, the game that actually determined who went to the NBA Finals, Steph turned right back into MVP Steph, and he went off. To me, is very overshadowed by Klay's performance and the fact that they didn't finish the job. But for everybody saying he never had a big moment, in this exact game, Steph had 15 in the fourth quarter, and he hit the dagger to book KD's flight right to Oakland. So he did have some big moments. If they actually completed that year and won that finals, that moment would be very highlighted, but they just fell short, so nobody really cares. Russell Westbrook hasn't been past the first round in 4 years, but even though it feels like a century ago, it was a time where he was actually in the NBA Finals. People already consider Russ a hyperactive kind of tunnel vision type of player, but trust me, at 23, he was a lot worse. He was so overly ball dominant as a point guard that after a terrible Game 2, the greatest point guard ever said this.
That was the worst point guard in a championship finals I've ever seen. He was too wild. He was taking off-balance shots.
Now, I don't know if Russ took that personal or what, but literally one game after he said that, Russ went out and literally laid it all on the line. They just fell short, so people kind of forget about it. But if you look at that film, Russ was almost willing them to that win. They just didn't have enough. And that game was so impressive that after the game, Magic kind of changed his tune.
Let me apologize to Russell Westbrook because in Game 4, he was off the charts. 43 points. He put on a show. I see now that he has to play this way, Michael, for the Thunder to have a chance to win. So stay with playing that aggressive offensive game. He's not a traditional point guard. Just do your thing, Russell. Don't listen to Magic Johnson.
Unfortunately for Melo, the story of his career is that he just never won in the big moments. Not saying it's all his fault, not saying he doesn't deserve any of the blame. For whatever reason, he just never won. In Carmelo's first playoff series with the Knicks, all I could remember is the fact that he got swept by the Celtics. Like, that's literally all I remembered. But as I recently looked back, that wasn't all that happened. In Game 2 versus the defending Eastern Conference champions, Melo lost his point guard Chauncey Billups, and he tried his hardest to drag that garbage roster to a win, but he just couldn't do it. And I mean, he had no help. Mind you, this was before JR, Iman Shumpert, Jeremy Lin, etc. So it was really no one there. Looking back on it, all you would see is that he got swept, but he actually had one of his best playoff games. It just didn't matter. When I think about Rajon Rondo, the last thing I think about is scoring. I think about his passes, his signature move, his feistiness, but never really scoring. Sometimes even the players that might not specialize in scoring, they just might have to fill those shoes for at least one game. In 2012, in the Eastern Conference Finals against Miami, yes, I'm talking about this series, Game 2, Boston fell short. The aging Big Three really didn't step up to their standard that game, so little bro had to fill some pretty big shoes that game. Rondo, who no one considers to be a legit scorer, arguably put together one of the greatest stat lines in playoff history, and no one talks about it because they lost. This may sound kind of crazy, but to me that game was very comparable to Magic's Game 6 in the finals his rookie year. It was a passer slash playmaker completely stepping out of their game for the betterment of the team. Rondo just happened to lose. In Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals, again, bruh, I'm in your head. I know exactly what you think about. Ray Allen hitting one of the biggest shots in NBA history, and Chris Smoove actually being in the frame. Like, that's kind of crazy. I ain't gonna cap. But if I'm being real, in that specific series, we should have witnessed a 37-year-old GOAT winning his 4th NBA Finals MVP. Greg Popovich completely blew that series. And you want to know how exactly I know? Because that 37-year-old GOAT wasn't in the game during the biggest moment of that series. That small lineup caused a very clutch Chris Bosh rebound. And you want to know what makes it 10 times worse? This is what Tim Duncan did in that game. Imagine if he was actually out there to grab that 18th board. He would have won his 5th NBA ring right there, and he would have easily won Finals MVP. But you just got to blame Pop for that one. Of course, that 30-17 game is complete burnt history, but it happened. It's just unfortunately nobody cares. I think for the most part, we all know James Harden's reputation. Most people think he's a choker in the playoffs. In fact, in one of my recent videos, I literally detailed a Game 5 of the 2015 Western Conference Finals where James Harden made 2 shots in the entire game. A closeout game, he only made 2 shots. That's why I personally say he disappeared in the big moment in that series. But the game before that, James Harden did exactly what people wanted him to do in that Game 5. If you ask me, I like to think in that very game, he put together his best playoff performance of his career, and he really showed that grit that we all asked for in the postseason. It's just very unfortunate that 2 days after he played arguably his best playoff game, he balanced it right back out with arguably his worst, so it kind of evened each other out. And finally, we all know how Kobe left his last game, literally in perfect Kobe fashion. But I'm sure you probably have no idea how he left his last playoff game. Unfortunately, it wasn't the same result because he didn't win. He ran into a steaming young OKC team filled with talent in that backcourt, so he just didn't win, but he specifically never disappointed. In this last playoff game, Kobe did all he could do to wield that old-ass, beat-up-ass team to a playoff win, but they just didn't have enough. As you can see, these were his numbers in his last playoff game, and this is what he did in his last 3 playoff games. So he went out on top. But that's the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, man, thank you guys so much for 200K. Big 300K on the way, man. It's coming. I'm going to put in this work. Like the video, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, follow my social media sites. Do all that great stuff, guys. And as always, until next time, stay tuned.